was widely expected the president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, will exploit this crisis to tighten his grip on power.
What's going on, everybody? Hope you're all doing well. Hope you're having a fantastic day. I sure as hell am not. First and foremost, excuse my nasally voice. I'm just getting over a sinus infection, as well as the other day I battled about 4 migraines in the span of 2 hours. So if I sound like shit and I look like shit, it's probably because I feel like complete shit right now. But regardless, we're going to power through this and try to make this as good as possible. Without further ado, onto the topic of this video, the Turkish one-day coup, or the 2016 coup, as it's also referred as. This coup happened in July 15th to the 16th of 2016, and arguably may have been the shortest coup in human history, lasting only about 8 to 12 hours, but resulted in hundreds of deaths and hundreds of thousands of arrests. However, there is an air of suspicion to this coup. There is a palpable sense of collusion. What I mean by that is, after hearing about this coup and reading about it and doing some further research, I've come to a conclusion of one question: whether this coup was planned or not. And by planned, I mean, did the government know this was going to happen and take advantage of it? Or did they not know and they just seen a perfect opportunity and decided to take it? So with that question fresh on your mind, I leave that up to you, the viewer, to make that decision yourself. And leave your opinions in the comments on what you think actually happened with this coup, because it's suspicious to say the least, and you'll find out why later. So without further ado, the Turkish one-day coup. From 1927 to 2002, Turkey has had a long history of coups and military interventions, igniting the country into an endless cycle of violence and war. Most prominently was in 1960, when Kemal Gürsoy formed a coalition within the Turkish military, aimed to overthrow the acting president Celal Bayar. This coup would go on to be successful and result in the execution of the previously mentioned president, the Prime Minister Adnan Menderes, as well as several other high-level politicians and administrators. So the template was created and replicated roughly every 10 to 20 years in Turkey, sparking coup after coup until eventually 2002, when the last military intervention took place. Well, till 2016, that is. So with that out of the way, you can see that Turkey has had a long history of attempted coups. And when I mean long history, I mean long. We're talking nearly 100 years of a coup pretty much every 10 to 20 years. Turkey's kind of like that one friend we all have that is just always a little behind on style and fashion trends. It's 2025 and they're still wearing, Ed Hardy jeans and fucking Affliction t-shirts. And they still just don't get that shit is not cool anymore. So coup attempts and insurrections was very trendy in Turkey for decades until 2002. When the last really on paper military intervention happened, until fast forwarding to 2016, where a Turkish exile living in the United States was allegedly involved in an attempted overthrowing of the president of Turkey, resulting in hundreds of deaths, hundreds of thousands imprisoned for seemingly no reason, as well as a very interesting and questionable moment in their history. On the evening of July 15th, 2016, elements of the Turkish 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Army, the Presidential Guard, Navy forces, and Air forces formed a collective internally called the Peace at Home Council. Their goal? To overthrow the current president. The reason? To preserve secularism, eliminate democratic rule, and to put an end to the president's disregard for human rights. The mastermind behind this plot was allegedly, according to Turkey, Fethullah Gulen, a Turkish exile living in the United States and labeled by the Turkish government as a terrorist leader. Supposedly on the night of the 15th, was in command of 8,651 soldiers, 1,214 military academy students, 1,670 NCOs, 74 tanks, 172 armored vehicles, 35 planes, 24 of which were fighter jets, 37 helicopters, and 3 warships. So with Gulen's alleged micro-army, I suppose you could call it, they were locked, cocked, and ready to rock. They had quite the strength and manpower behind them. Thousands of soldiers, dozens of tanks, hundreds of armored vehicles, helicopters, planes, you name it. They basically had a small army ready to rock and roll. Now the question was, would this be successful? With numbers like that, it's difficult for it to not be. Though Turkey is a big country and has a NATO-powered military, that also means they do as well. I mean, these are troops actively involved in the current Turkish military. They have access to the same equipment. However, a very interesting turn of events would happen, and you will see that very shortly. But let's just say the coup didn't quite go as planned. The stage was set and the coup commenced. Tanks squealed across roads and highways, jets circled the skies, and troops marched into news stations, military and governmental installations, creating checkpoints and roadblocks to slow or prevent any counterattacks and to cripple the government. However, to their surprise, civilians began coming out en masse, blocking and disrupting the plot by any means necessary. Armed only with the passion of the civilians, began shouting down the plotters and harassed them however they could. Sadly, this moment of hard dialogue would be dashed, as the order was given to open fire on anyone further attempting to destroy or disrupt the coup. Simultaneously, planes began bombing and strafing administrative buildings and strategic locations, while the ground forces changed from indirect warning shots to directed kill shots, shooting down hundreds across the country and most notably in Istanbul, centered around the Istanbul Bridge where the most violence was seen that night. As said previously, this coup would take a Shyamalan-esque twist, one that even the president, the coup members, and civilians alike did not see coming. Who would expect when you have 10,000 plus armed soldiers, dozens of tanks, dozens and hundreds of armored vehicles and helicopters, that anybody would have the fucking balls to go out in the streets and stand in front of them and dare them to shoot at them and to try to stop them with just their voice and just their passion? That is an incredible moment and a feat of not only courage and strength that should not be underestimated. I don't know if anybody watching this, myself included, would have the balls to actually do something like that, but my God, you gotta respect it. Unfortunately though, a moment like this, as historic and powerful as it is, generally is crushed very quickly. As you'll see, this coup takes a very, very dark turn. One that is so shocking and surprising that I just had to make a video about it, because things like this don't happen very often, albeit this happened many years ago. It still rings true to this day on how fucking nuts a government or group of people can act when they feel like their back is against the wall. As the night progressed, desperation and confusion reached a fever pitch within the junta. Bewildered by the ever-growing crowds, a last-ditch decision was made: strafe and bomb the civilians with fighter jets. A decision that no one would believe would be made by the same members who swore an oath to protect its citizens. Yet when faced with the chance of the coup failing, the defecting military members escalated its willingness for violence, resulting in the death toll climbing. This decision would be front and center at the Istanbul Bridge, where a large percentage of protesters were shot at and killed, as well as shot at by tanks and eventually strafed by 20mm cannons on a fixed-wing fighter jet. Stunned by these events, the president finally made an appearance, but not in the formal matter. Instead was forced to FaceTime a news anchor and speak into a microphone held up by the anchor's iPhone. The president spoke not only to the junta, but also to those fighting back against the coup and the standing military. A truly bizarre scene to say the least. Though bizarre, it was highly effective, resulting in droves of civilians, young and old, to rush out into the streets and drive to locations where defecting military members were at in order to disrupt them. This would mark the end of the one-day coup in Turkey. However, what followed was not only triumphant, but also very suspicious. Well, if you're just as surprised as I was when I first seen this, then good for you. That's the exact reaction you should have. Because, holy shit, could you fucking imagine? You are out there standing in front of an attempted insurrection of your country. They have tanks, armored vehicles, guns, you name it. When you finally start putting a wrench in their operation, they open fire with fucking tanks. Tanks at point blank range. I mean, what the fuck, dude? I don't want to say it's a little heavy-handed, but Jesus Christ, I don't know what else is. I mean, these guys got flags, maybe a stick or two, and so you hit them with a fucking Abrams tank. And then when that doesn't work, you send the birds in. You start strafing them with planes, bombing them, striking them down with 20mm cannons from fighter jets and helicopters. I mean, good God. Every time I hear and see it and read it, it is just as crazy as the first time I seen it. And what's even more astonishing is it fucking worked. Even after they bombed them, even after they strafed them, they did everything they possibly could, just shy of just flat out slaughtering them like cattle. And it worked. It stopped the coup. They didn't know what to do. It threw such a wrench in their whole operation that it fell apart within hours. This is an attempt to take over a first world nation and was halted by 20,000-ish, maybe 100,000-ish unarmed people just by standing in front of them and essentially annoying the shit out of them. I mean, that's nuts. That is insane. But that goes to show you that people hold more power in this world than we think. You may have guns, you may have tanks, you may have bombs, you have all those, but it will require you to kill every single one of those people. If they're willing to stand in defiance to that, then there's few things that they won't. But now comes the incredibly suspicious part. And you will see very shortly what I mean by that, but I want you to hold your opinions aside for just a moment until you see the end. Because what follows was bizarre. Some justified, but a lot incredibly bizarre and a little too coincidental for me to say with 100% certainty that this was not planned or wasn't known about and taken advantage of. So with that being said, that is the end of the one-day coup, but now it is time for the aftermath of the one-day coup. The morning of July 16th, with the fires put out and the bodies carted away, it was time to process what just happened. The official casualty count after the one-day coup was as follows. 300 personnel were killed, including civilians, police, and military. Several governmental buildings were destroyed, including the Turkish parliament and presidential building, as well as the international airport. Hundreds of vehicles were left behind or destroyed, as well as thousands of rifles and grenades. Following the failed coup, the Turkish government began a campaign of arrests, suspensions, and firings across the nation for anyone remotely affiliated with Gulen. If you sneezed in the direction of Gulen, you would face prosecution. To be exact, 40,000 were detained, 10,000 soldiers were arrested, 2,745 judges were arrested, 15,000 educational staff members were suspended, 21,000 teacher licenses were suspended without reason. So this began the question. Was this coup planned by the government, creating the perfect excuse to jail or financially dislocate dissenters? Did the government know this was going to happen, allowing them to crack down on Gulen supporters? Or was it all just a matter of perfect timing meets perfect opportunity? The truth is unknown, but the mass arrest of personnel who seemingly had no involvement in the coup, and the misaligning numbers of those involved and those arrested, leaves far more questions than answers. So I leave that to you. What do you think happened? Whew, oh boy. Well, now that you know the full picture, and you know the whole story, I leave the question up to you. What do you think happened? And please leave a comment below on what you think happened in your opinion based off of the information provided or what you may know already or something that I don't know. So with all that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. If there's anything I can do to improve it or make it better, please leave a comment below. And please comment below what you think happened. I would love to see a discussion in the comments and see other people's opinion and thoughts on this situation. And as always, thank you for your time, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.